I came to Colombia with 4 of my closest friends, and our biggest objective is to learn where your coffee comes from. We're going on a 5-day bikepacking trip through 2 important coffee regions in Colombia. The first is Antioquia, and the second is Eje Cafetero. At the end of this journey, we're going to arrive at Valle de Cocora. It's going to be very much like arriving in our own personal paradise after what will be an extremely difficult journey. I think it's incredibly important to know as consumers what you're buying. So in the case of coffee, everyone in the world is drinking it, and we want to go to the source and find out who's growing those coffee beans and how those people live.
I heard about this trip through my friend and business partner, Zack. I would say we are very inexperienced cyclists, and we're just going for it.
Zack's definitely the link between all of us, my oldest friend for sure.
My goal is just really taking in the Colombian countryside and really enjoying the experience and become a, amateur cyclist.
I think there's a lot of power in moving yourself through nature and across space. And biking for me is a new frontier that I haven't tried before.
We're learning about coffee production backwards, starting with the cup that you drink in your house, all the way through these different processes and filters, back to the small coffee farmer that originally plants that seed in the ground. We made it to De Los Andes coffee facility, and we met up with our tour guide who was going to show us around.
And they gave us these masks and hard hats, and I thought, above and beyond to protect the beans, but it was really just the conditions. There's so much dust in the air from the skin of the coffee. And you walk in these big warehouse doors, and it's floor-to-ceiling coffee bags.
Todo lo que se compra en los puntos de compra se saca a esta vuelta. Ya acá pasa a producción.
¿Cuál cantidad de café está en este edificio?
Aproximadamente pueden haber 4 millones de kilos, pero tiene mucha más capacidad, más o menos para 7.
The first process is shelling the coffee bean. Once they've removed that initial outer skin, they go through and inspect each bean based on color.
¿Este oscuro qué significa?
Es proceso de finca. Entonces, digamos, se quedó mucho tiempo almacenado dentro de la finca. Entonces se le pegó más la pulpa.
¿Para el color?
Por el color.
Sí, okay, bueno.
I kind of just assumed that all beans would go through the same process, but you could tell that they were diverted in different areas based on the quality.
The guys in the warehouse are lifting these sacks of coffee over their shoulders like it's nothing. It's hot, it's dusty.
We came out completely coated in dust and grit, and I can't imagine having to work there every single day.
It was time to get back on our bikes and make our way towards our first campsite outside of Jardín, but looming ahead of us was a very steep and very challenging climb.
Sure could use an IV about now.
We ended the night in Jardín. We rolled up to this quaint little town square with a fountain in the middle and a church at one end.
We focused on getting some food. We ended up gorging ourselves on some pizza, having some beers, and just as we were finishing, the rain started to fall.
When it's warm rain falling, it's kind of the perfect opportunity to go out and celebrate the end of the first day on tour.
We woke up that morning in Jardín and needed to caffeinate, so we headed to the De Los Andes Cafe.
A lot of heads turned at this big gaggle of gringos with their bikes and helmets and clippy shoes. We ordered a big Chemex to share, and the daunting amount of riding we had to do was settling in.
Jardín, beautiful little town square. It seemed like a very local, natural spot. There is no flat road in this country, or at least in that region. So they really have these coffee plants just growing at such a ridiculous gradient.
We reluctantly left Hardin a little later than we had planned.
And that's when the road turned to gravel. And it was uphill.
The climbs are really difficult and the downhill is just exhilarating.
The sun went down and we had to put our headlamps on.
We realized we weren't going to make it to Rio Sucio and started to get worried about where we were going to sleep on this jungle road.
Luckily, on our way down the mountain in the dark, we came across a small farm, I guess you would call it, with like 12 cows and a couple pigs.
The house was a work in progress, I think. They had a working indoor kitchen. The side room was completely unfinished.
Those people were so nice. They let us stay on their property. They had this kind of makeshift soccer field cut out of the side of the mountain that we camped on. And that night they made us trout and rice, and it was delicious.
I looked out at this farm and you've got pastured cows and this house that these people had, and you've got these big old pig that's just hanging out and chickens running across the road.
It was really cool to see these people building this little life that kind of took care of them and people who came through. I mean, they had everything they needed right there. That's the fish we ate last night.
It was a long, rocky descent down to Rio Sucio, and by the time we got to the bottom, our arms were totally rattled and I could barely squeeze the grips. Before the coffee is taken to the processing plant, it's first bought from the farmers. So the next stop was the De Los Andes buying and tasting facility.
Farmers come in with burlap sacks full of beans and they went through the process of taking a small sample. They measured specific amounts. They counted out the number of faulty beans in each sample. And then they paid the farmers according to the ratio of good to bad beans, basically.
Este es el laboratorio de catación. El catador se llama Oscar. Me explica un poquito sobre más o menos la catación del café.
I would say he's like the sommelier of coffee.
¿Y un día cuántos copos bebes?
80.
80.
80 secos tomas.
No, solo, ¿cómo se dice?
¿Cuántos tomas?
Alrededor de 10, 15 más o menos.
10, 15.
Check your heart rate.
Sí, muy rápido.
Sí, pero yo ya llevo alrededor de 10 años catando. Entonces ya para mí eso es como el día a día, pues, y entonces ya es costumbre. Ya. Después de que el café se estabiliza alrededor de unos 4 minutos, se hace lo que es romper taza o romper la costra que tenemos en la parte de encima.
¿Y por qué haces esto?
Porque
Después de 4 minutos.
después de 4 minutos, la idea es que debajo de esa costra hay ciertos olores, olores en el café que son muy volátiles con las altas temperaturas. Entonces lo que hacemos con eso es permitir que esos olores se levanten y poder evaluar las características aromáticas del café, realmente cómo se van a presentar. Normalmente pueden aparecer notas mucho de chocolate, notas mucho de frutas, notas muy cítricas en los cafés de esta zona.
I think we were all enamored with his slurping process.
And he would be tasting like for acidity, for flavor, for body, and then for the aftertaste.
Seeing the expertise that's involved in qualifying the farmer's product, in tasting the farmer's product, and then ultimately putting it out onto the market, it was an integral part of the process and really interesting to see. We started making our way up the town of Arauca and eventually out.
That's when the climbs were starting to get serious. We started up this thing and it was grueling.
This huge climb was just an incredible struggle for me.
We saw these trucks coming down the mountain, and Eddie and I were both just joking about fantasizing of weaving in front of them.
And I was like, there's just no way I can do this. I'm gonna quit. I think I probably aged 10 years that day.
We arrived at night again, this time in the town of Marsella, and we were back on schedule.
I'm a little worried about, after last night's monstrous climbs, like what we're doing today in terms of
Climb?
yeah, like activity.
It's hard to say because on the GPS, you know, what looks like a little climb is just like this life destroyer. One thing you notice right away in Colombia is that these people are passionate about cycling. So we wanted to meet with an expert, and we found Tomas Molina, who's a local cycling guide.
Cycling here in Colombia, it starts because a lot of people just do cycling to go to work or go to the school. Sometimes the school is 1 hour or 2 hour walking, so they can just have a bicycle and go by bicycle to the school. And this is the same way that Quintana, for example, begins in cycling.
So how would you say Colombia ranks today in terms of producing the best cyclists in the world?
I think that in the last 8 years we have been in the top 5 nations in the world cycling.
Yeah.
Right now, yeah.
I can't really imagine more stunning scenery than what we've been riding. What is your favorite place to ride in Colombia?
My favorite place to ride in Colombia is Antioquia.
Antioquia. So we picked a good spot.
Yeah.
What do you think? Coffee and cycling, do they mix?
I think that is the best combination.
Amen.
Coffee and cycling is the best combination. Yeah, for sure.
So before we came on this trip, everyone we talked to, like our families, were concerned about safety here. But every town we go to seems incredibly safe.
I understand the concern of foreign people that come here because we had a past that we can't forget and we don't have to forget. So it's normal that the people is afraid to come here, but don't worry, and you are our ambassadors.
You know, cycling is so important to today's culture in Colombia. Where do you see it going in the future?
People love cycling in Colombia. People, I think, that respect cycling in Colombia. Cars respect cyclists in Colombia. So I think that Colombia is a very good destination for cycling.
You know, cars cheer you on, kids run out and they'll ride next to you. Everyone is so supportive.
We arrived in Finlandia, and just like every night, we needed to figure out where we were going to set up camp.
We stopped to get a delicious cup of coffee and sent Zack off as our ambassador to figure out where we were going to stay that night.
Eventually, I met a man named Carlos. I met his wife, and they walked me around the inside of this old farmhouse that they lived in. So, podemos acampar aquí.
aquí, acá, o más arriba, o allá, donde quieran.
Okay.
Aquí es muy tranquilo, todo es muy tranquilo.
Carlos and Aldo were super friendly, and I just knew that the group was going to be stoked to stay at this place tonight. Carlos, bien o no? Gracias.
A la provincia.
Amigos.
Hola, buenas noches.
Buenas tardes.
¿Tienes muchas personas que acampar?
Son los primeros.
¡Oh, no! Yancy. Alba. ¿Cómo estás?
Hola, Eddie.
Alba.
And they just kind of give us a tour of their farmland and overlooking this 14,000-foot mountain range.
It's kind of the ideal bikepacking night.
We woke up in the morning, started packing up the tents. There's like 8 horses, and the chickens are all out. Alda brings out breakfast, this full spread.
We had, arepas con queso, eggs, fresh pressed orange juice, local coffee. ¿Y conoces Tony and Nelly? Sí.
It was really an idyllic setting and way more than any dirty bikepacker deserves.
El fin día. Cheers, Eduardo. It was really, really hard to leave that morning.
Now with some arepas con queso in our bellies, we were ready for day 5 and to make our push for the CocoraVelo.
A part of me that was like, I'm not really ready for this to be over, but at the same time, we were excited to get there.
Every cup of coffee that you drink at your home, that you get at Starbucks, that moves around the world every day, it all starts in a small mountain town at a small farm like this.
Hola. Buenos días. ¿Cómo estás? Mucho gusto, Carlos.
Zack.
¿Estás bien aprenderlo del proceso del café?
Sí, gracias.
The farmer there was super nice and walked us through the entire process, from sprouting the beans to create seedlings to how they plant them in the side of the hill.
El árbol debe quedar más o menos al mismo nivel del bordo de abajo.
How to tell when the beans are ripe and how they pick them.
And then he let Zack and I pick a couple of the beans and was articulating, he knew just the shade of red that you need to pick the bean. Got a green one, he said I couldn't work here. We kind of asked him to demonstrate how the pros do it.
And he picked them so fast. Wow. It was really impressive. They wash them, they separate them based on quality, and take them to the local buyer.
Estos son los cafés baratos. Estos son los cafés que nos tomamos acá. Lo bueno me los llevan ustedes. Sí, esos son los buenos, le echan para Estados Unidos, Suiza, todos los países.
Y esto solamente
exportación.
Exportación, esto solamente.
Ese que es bueno, sí es de exportación.
Okay. I mean, I honestly thought it was such a shame that this country produces such great coffee and 90% of it is leaving, going elsewhere, and the people working so hard to grow it aren't really experiencing this pride and process that's happening within their own country.
You definitely develop an appreciation for the input that gets that bean to the next step of the process.
It was kind of getting midday and a little hot, so we wanted to find a good place to swim and cool off.
And we stopped by this countryside river watering hole.
It was very refreshing and just what we needed before the big climb.
So the final climb to Kokora was about 7K, and there's only one road up to this valley.
I always like testing myself, and this was definitely a physical, mental test that I loved, and I think, bikepacking might be one of my new passions.
I mean, I was losing it about 500 meters before the end, but Jesse and I went head to head for a little while there. We were really emptying the tanks. We kept pumping it and got there, and we were exhausted, but so elated to have finally made it there.
Get to the end where everyone's like kind of waiting and cheering on, and like it was definitely a highlight for me.
The last stretch of the valley, we couldn't ride, it was a little too rough. So we parked the bikes and we started hiking in.
A small Colombian dog decided to adopt us, and the 6 of us made a push to a higher vantage point looking over the CocoraVelo. This particular palm tree is called the Quindio palm. It's the official tree of Colombia, and it is the tallest recorded palm tree in the world.
And it's like, you know, the movie scene in Jurassic Park, and you're looking out over this stunning valley. Worth it.
Wow.
Oh my God. It was just one of those sights that you may look back at it like a year from now, 2 years from now, and you never believe that you were actually there and you saw those things.
I think it'll be hard to lift a cup to my mouth without thinking of all the people that I met in Colombia and the process and the passion they have for this bean that turns into a delicious morning beverage.